ठीक है रे. So let's begin the interview, but first we will wait for some audience to come in. Just a few seconds and then we will begin. Am I audible to you? You can say something if you. Mukesh ji?
Yeah, you are audible.
Okay. So, welcome everyone. Hello and welcome to the first in a series of conversation with Mukesh. This first episode is titled On the Struggles of a Krishnamurti Reader. To begin with, I am Kaushik, a doctor in becoming at BHU, and with me here is Mukesh ji, who is a speaker and facilitator for various international meditational dialogues and retreats. He has been exploring the fundamental questions of life and the timeless insights of J. Krishnamurti, Buddha, and other such teachers for nearly 2.5 decades. He holds a master's degree in Indian and Western philosophy. A traveler at heart, Mukesh ji, please tell us something about how you came upon Krishnamurti teachings for the first time.
Thank you, Kaushik. I discovered the teachings of Krishnamurti when I was 16, just after my high school. At that time, I suddenly found myself discontented with everything, discontented with my education, with my surroundings, with my friend circle. And I started exploring deeper questions of life. There were so many questions, and there was hardly anyone with whom I can share, I can talk. And it was like a thirsty person knocking at every door. And I started reading whatever I could get, the teachers, various philosophies. And in that process, I found books of J. Krishnamurti. And after reading those books, I immediately felt a direct connection with them, as if somebody was here who was talking to me directly. A conversation which is directly to the heart. And I felt that the questions I was already thinking about, those questions were echoed in the teachings of Krishnamurti. So it was a beautiful journey, and that journey is still going on.
Yes, Krishnamurti is such a cool companion to have in one's troubled times, at least. One famous statement from the book Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari, if you have studied it, comes to my mind that humans developed an ingenious ability of storytelling in order to cooperate with each other, flexibly in large numbers. But Krishnamurti emphasizes upon a different kind of cooperation. Would you like to elaborate on it?
Yeah, this is true that human beings have been gathering around certain ideas, around certain symbols, around certain traditions, belief systems, religions. And those gatherings have been around certain self-centered motives. They are all, governed by this fear to identify with something, this fear to belong to something larger than oneself. But Krishnamurti is talking about a very different kind of cooperation. Because all these cooperations which you just described, they are based on fear. And here Krishnamurti is talking about a cooperation which is based on true love and compassion, which is not based on any ideas, which is not based on any symbol or belief systems. It is based on understanding life as it is, exploring life deeply. So this cooperation is based on the silence of the mind, if I can say, an understanding of life. And this is beyond all borders, beyond all traditions. And this cooperation, if I can say, is based on truth and ever-going exploration of truth.
Our traditional cooperation is based on fear, but sometimes it's based on benefit also. You know.
Yeah, actually, fear is always governed by this search for what is beneficial for me. And this is also a self-centered journey. When we are self-centered, fear becomes a dominating element. That's why in all our traditions, in all our belief systems, organizations, this element of fear is central.
Mm-hmm.
And fear is inevitable when there is a self-centeredness. Though it can give benefits in the beginning, it looks beneficial immediately, but on the long run, it is always destructive.
Uh, you, if I remember, you have worked at Rajghat Krishnamurti Center in Varanasi for a long time. Uh, Actually, we have met for the first time at the center only. Being one of K centers, how is the work culture there?
Yeah, see, I feel that all these centers
Mm-hmm.
established by Krishnamurti, they are oases of peace. They are wonderful experiments,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and these retreat centers are situated in beautiful natural surroundings. There is no ritual at all. If you go to some other retreat centers, you are required to follow certain, rituals, certain kind of practices. But here, these are the centers which do not ask you to follow anything except your own sincerity, your seriousness,
Mm-hmm.
and delve into these wonderful teachings.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a wonderful place to be there and a wonderful opportunity to learn about yourself, go deeply into these questions. And anybody can go to stay there and learn about oneself and life.
Okay. Thank you, Mukeshi. One of the basic difficulty a Krishnamurti reader faces, now we are coming to our major questions, uh, is how to differentiate between practical thoughts and psychological thoughts. Krishnamurti says psychological thoughts are detrimental to one's awakening, while practical thoughts are yet essential. How does one differentiate between the two?
Yeah, we have to really understand Krishnamurti's teachings in the right perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Because when Krishnamurti is questioning thought, he is not questioning the physical aspect of thought, which is very useful. For example, to remember one's name, to remember where one is living,
Addresses.
and to do all these, our day-to-day work, our education. And so this physical aspect of thought is very useful in our day-to-day living. And when it turns into psychological aspect, how does it happen? Suppose you are a student and you are studying this medicine.
Yes.
So in order to study medicine, you require this thinking process,
Mm-hmm.
and you are using that with all your understanding, clarity, with all your passion. But once you start thinking that I should be ahead of my colleagues, I should be the I should be at the top of the ladder, then it turns into psychological thinking, because now your focus is on becoming better than the other.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are passionate about what you are doing, then you are not thinking about in terms of comparison, competition. but you are doing your best. And in doing that, you are using your thought. There is a right place of thought, right place of analysis. So we should not mix this physical thought and the psychological thought. So what is psychological thought? Whenever I am thinking in terms of becoming, like I am this, and I want to become something else in the future. So this movement from what is to what should be, this is psychological thought. And our minds are busy, occupied in these thoughts. All the time we are thinking, I should be that or I should not be that. Comparison is going on. And these psychological thoughts, they take a lot of energy. And our energies are wasted in non-essential things. And then we don't have energy to meet the life as it is. So that's why it is very important to understand the meaninglessness and the destructive nature of this psychological thinking.
Yes, I believe we most of the time read through K's teachings hastily. That's why these misunderstandings come into being. For example, he asks us to stay with what is, as you said, and see what happens. But we don't do that, and we read further on. We don't stay with the what is. Later, we find out through reading that what is undergoes a mutation, a transformation when one stays with it. But we come to it through reading further by and studying Krishnamurti. So now our mind gets crippled as it is already premeditating on the outcome, that is transformation, and not staying with what is per se. We try to stay with sorrow, for example, not for staying sake, but for it to end. How do we end this duplicitous approach towards living the teachings?
This is a very important question, and it's a very practical difficulty which we all face. What happens that when mind is approaching anything or any teachings,
Your voice is breaking. Please correct your microphone. No, it's not audible. No, no, not audible.
now?
Yeah, yeah, you are audible. Yes. Again, it's gone. It's gone again.
Hello?
Yeah,
It's gone?
it's coming. It's coming. Sound is coming. Please continue.
So, so what happens when our mind is approaching any teachings or any state of our mind, we are approaching it usually with a certain motive in order to find a certain result. And this is the nature of the mind. If we watch the nature of thought, it it never stays with the reality. It is all the time reacting to the reality and running away towards what should be or what should not be. And so when we face any mental state, whether pain, sorrow, grief, or pleasure, so what we are doing, we are meeting these states with a certain motive, either with this motive that it should end or it should continue. So the mind is never staying with the reality, with what is. It is all the time distorting what is. So when we see some sorrow, our immediate reaction is that it should end.
Mm-hmm.
Now mind is busy in trying to end sorrow or trying to end jealousy or any other mental phenomena. So we are never staying with what is. We are busy changing what is. And this is the one most important aspect of these teachings. And when he says that freedom comes with the understanding of what is, and it is not possible as long as mind is busy in changing what is. So the real question is why mind is not able to stay with what is.
can we watch this tendency of the mind, watching the discomfort of the mind with staying with what is? And I feel we cannot force ourselves to stay with what is, because if we are approaching what is again with some motive, if we are making these teachings into a technique, then what is happening? The traditional mind is trying to use the teachings in a traditional way. And here these teachings are actually questioning this traditional approach. Traditional approach is to make an ideal of something and try to achieve that ideal.
So how is this different from the traditional approach? Yes. Krishnamurti teaching.
This is different. What these teachings are showing that when we are pursuing any ideal, we are wasting our energy. Actually, ideals are projections of the mind. Anything, ideal of non-violence, ideal of love, ideal of an enlightenment. So all these ideals are based on the imagination or projection of the mind. And when mind is pursuing any ideal, it is pursuing itself, and it will create that state. But it will be illusion.
Artificial.
So that's why, that's why these teachings are asking to watch this tendency of the mind and see whether it can stay without doing anything with what is. Like, for example, like our minds, our brains are conditioned for thousands of years. And we have inherited this brain, human brain. And this is not an individual brain. It has not developed as my brain or your brain. It has evolved as a human brain with all its conditionings, its fears, its pursuit of security and all that. Now, when we realize that our brain is conditioned, what happens? The first reaction is that I want to be free of this conditioning. Now, this reaction is also part of the conditioning. Can we see that? So can we watch this conditioning and not react to that conditioning? Stay with it, learn about it. In that learning, in that facing this conditioning as it is, there is a beginning of freedom and transformation.
Beautiful. So, as you said that, yeah, please continue.
I just wanted to add that at one place, Krishnamurti says,
yeah,
what is freedom? Freedom is not freedom from conditioning. Freedom is to see conditioning as it is operating. So he's defining freedom in a very different way. It's like this freedom is to watch things as they are, attend to things as it is.
And in watching, there is no choice, right?
Yeah. In watching, this watching itself is freedom. Actually, you can only watch, you can only look and observe when there is freedom. If I am watching from my background, from my opinions, my belief systems, then I'm not watching. I'm only thinking. So thinking about something and looking at something, they are two entirely different things. And here these teachings are inviting us to look at things directly. And that looking itself is freedom.
Yes. So when K says that there is no technique to freedom, there is no technique, that then we might become sluggish in our approach towards it, because sometimes we are uh, a bit of what do you say, disarrayed in our approach, and we become sluggish. He says no master is needed, and this might gratify our ego. And he also says that we have to become a light to ourselves, and there is a valid risk of self-propaganda if we do not understand this clearly. So how do we intelligently avoid these traps? Mukesh, please elaborate on this.
Yeah, we have to understand, as I said, the teachings in its right perspective. Like when Krishnamurti says, do not follow anybody, be a light unto yourself.
Mm-hmm.
This is what Buddha also said. So he's inviting us to see our dependence on anything psychologically. Like when we depend for our freedom, for our understanding on anybody, we are already trapped in our conditioning. So this is something very logical. One can see that dependence on anything psychologically is bondage. It will hinder our understanding. But of course, like when we are trying to understand, study a subject, say medicine or biology, science or literature, we have to depend on a teacher who is giving that information.
Mm-hmm.
But that has its right place. But to depend psychologically on anybody, including Krishnamurti or Buddha, is a bondage. And this we have to really understand.
In traditional Hindu culture, also there is a concept of guru and discipleship. There is a heritage of it.
Yes, that's why we have to understand that Krishnamurti is not denying learning. We can learn from anything,
Mm-hmm.
like from any person. So learning is important. From whom you are learning, that is secondary. We can learn from any teacher, we can learn from our friends, from our relatives, from nature, from a bird, from a river. So this learning is an ongoing process. And this learning is not memorizing. It's not a process of accumulating information. Accumulating information has its place in the, as we said, in the physical world.
Mm-hmm.
But in understanding life, in living life holistically, accumulation has hardly any place. What we have to see, what we have to understand is that life is moving like a river and it is fresh every moment. And in order to live fully with great sensitivity, with passion, we have to see things as they are from moment to moment, listen things as they are. And another question you raised about the technique.
Mm-hmm.
See, we have to understand what is behind a technique. Technique is required in order to achieve some certain result. You
Yes.
follow certain steps
Mm-hmm.
and you achieve a desired result.
Outcome.
And
Yes.
this is very useful, valid in technical subjects, in the physical world. How to solve a problem, there are steps.
Mm-hmm.
How to do something, even how to cook your food, there are certain steps. So technique is required there. But in understanding life, in understanding yourself, in searching truth, technique become a technique becomes an obstacle. So you cannot find truth through any technique, through any method, because truth is something not static. It is all the time moving. It's a living thing. Even a challenge we face, a crisis, is also a living thing. So you cannot approach a living thing with a fixed set of ideas. So that's why these techniques, they become great obstacle in learning, in the psychological matters, in spiritual matters. So that's why we have to see the limitation of these techniques. And like for example, looking. In looking things as they are, no technique is needed. This is a gift of nature. We all have this faculty to pay attention to something directly. For paying attention, no technique is required. Like we are listening to each other. Listening itself is action. For listening, no technique is required. Just a mind which is quiet, silent, and which has this quality of attention.
But without these techniques, we sometimes feel lost. without a proper technique to guide us through spirituality, many of us feel lost in the wide ocean of spirituality. Would you like to say something about it?
Yeah, I would say, what is wrong with being lost? See, this is the whole problem, that we want to get fixed at some point, because being identified with a technique, with a tradition, gives a certain kind of security. If you are identified with a guru, with a teacher, you feel secured.
Mhm.
And when you are identified, then learning stops. And then you have created a prison out of that technique, out of that identification with a certain thing. So what is my intention? Is my intention to live life holistically with sense of openness, or my intention is to find security, which is, very limited? A security provided by thought, by the mind, through identification, is very limited. And at the end of it, we feel more frustrated. So that's why these teachings are demanding this unconditional freedom. That's why Krishnamurti always says that first step is the last step. And the first step has to be in freedom. If it is not in freedom, then you remain in that bondage, in the self-created prison.
So this idea of security is very innate in every organism. Every living organism is seeking security for its survival and propagation. So why is it so? Why has it become so important for human beings to transcend security?
Yeah. See, all living organism, any creature, they need security.
Mhm.
So there is a biological security. We
Yes.
all need that.
Yes.
And this is ingrained in our, we can say, DNA.
Yes.
And there is a protective mechanism,
Mhm.
like, when there is a,
Danger we
if we
develop
are,
fear. Yes.
yeah, like, if there is fire, we don't put our hands in fire.
Yes.
So there is a biological, this protective mechanism is there.
Mhm.
So no creature would like to be harmed.
Mhm.
We try to secure ourselves.
Mhm.
So biological security has its place. But here, what we are questioning is psychological security. Human beings are not satisfied with biological security. The real issue is in the psychological security. What is this psychological security? Like, people should recognize me. I should be ahead in the society. I should be more powerful than the other. All this hierarchy, all this sense of being better, better in the future, better than the other. So this psychological security is something very destructive. This search for psychological security. This search also threatens the biological security. So, like, thought tries to find security through identification by making images in relationship. And this security is very limited, very superficial. It breaks down very easily. So that's why we have to understand that this search for psychological security creates more insecurity. Even our physical security becomes threatened because of this.
Mhm. Right. So he says, in order to have a true relationship, one must not have images about each other. Besides, it is also true that people don't change. One has an image about oneself. We have an image about ourselves as well, and we keep on repeating the same pattern of behavior. Is it not then more beneficial to have an accurate image about the other person than to rediscover the same thing again and again? There is a risk of harm if we rediscover a toxic person time and again. Don't you think?
Yeah, the brain functions through images, and they are practically useful in our day-to-day living. And so we have to understand when these images turn into psychological, and that is what being questioned. Like in relationship, we create images of each other. First of all, we create an image about ourselves. We are born in a certain family, we are born in a certain religion, we are born in a certain nation. So there's a series of images, and we search our identity through those images, and we create images about the others. So there could be factual images, like image of, like, to recognize you, the brain needs to remember your image. So that is very useful. But now, suppose somebody has hurt you, and now the brain has registered that hurt, and brain is now afraid to meet that person next time, because it has that image, and it is thinking that if I meet that person, he or she may hurt again. Now, what happens in this process? The I become limited in my relationship. There is a fear.
Boundary around ourselves.
Yeah, and there is a fear in meeting that person, and our relationship becomes, quite limited, and we are not able to meet directly. So that's why these images prevent relationships. We have to understand that these images are really destructive, because they hide our true identity. We are not able to meet as human beings. So then the relationship, as Krishnamurti said, the relationship is between two images, not between two human beings. So is it possible that we have relationship between human beings? Otherwise, hurt is inevitable. Images and hurt, they go together. Because of images, we hurt each other. And images, of course, are based on the knowledge of oneself and the other person. And this knowledge, this psychological knowledge, is a great burden on human mind. So can we see the destructive nature of this knowledge, psychological knowledge? It prevents us from living fully in relating to another person directly.
So it is the same mind which thinks, which has both kind of images. The images which are essential, like you said, recognizing a person, and the images which are on a psychological level. So how come not registering only one kind bring about a radical transformation? Because it is the same mind which is building up images. So if all images are wiped out, then only the silence will prevail. But we are keeping some practical knowledge. We are keeping some useful images. So will it not prevent our radical transformation which Krishnamurti is talking about?
See, it is not a question of wiping of the images. Brain is collecting images, recording those images. But the attention is needed. The images which are really required, which are useful, and there are images which are not only meaningless, but they are also destructive, like these psychological images. So the noise in the mind is of those psychological images. So we cannot even remove that. We can be aware of those images. So the question is not wiping away of something. We cannot forcefully wipe away anything. We can simply be aware, be attentive to that image making process. So that's why we should not make an ideal of removing the images. Otherwise, there will be another conflict. We will make into it a technique. This is one danger in any teachings, including Krishnamurti teaching, that if we make an ideal out of the teachings, that we have to remove the images somehow, because it will give me freedom. then again I am approaching it from a traditional mindset. So what the teachings are saying, be completely aware, be attentive to whatever is happening. How mind is creating images, both physically and psychologically, and how these psychological images are preventing me from relating to another person and relating to oneself also directly. So it's more of being attentive and being aware of those images.
Can you recount any incident where you resolved a conflict in relationship, at home, workplace, or any other place? Any example uh,
Oh yes,
from your
sure.
personal
Like
experience?
yes, this has happened quite a few times.
Mm-hmm.
And when when something happens in a relationship and some incident happens, whether pleasant or painful, there was a registration of that, and I could see how this registration was preventing me from meeting that person. And when I stayed with this fact that how it is limiting my living,
Mm-hmm.
in staying with that fact, there was a sense of freedom. So I feel these teachings are very practical. And of course, as I said, don't make it into an ideal, but
Mm-hmm.
experiment with it. And we can see that, in our day-to-day living, the implications of having these images. I feel these images are the real prison. And Krishnamurti at one place said, the true freedom is freedom from these images. The real freedom is freedom from images. Because our whole sense of self, the I, is built through images. So one can ask, who am I? What am I? Is it just a bundle of images? And one bundle of images is meeting another bundle. So what will happen? Can there be any peace when two, bundles of images are meeting? How can there be love? And love is beyond images. Compassion is beyond images.
So, uh, we, with our psyche and relationships, from the nature of society, the society we live in, and society in turn adds to our conditioning. This occurs on the level of the whole wide world, that we are forming the society and society is in turn conditioning us. So how do we break this vicious cycle?
This we have to really understand that the world is created by all of us. Society is only a reflection of what we are from inside. Whatever is happening in the world outside is only a mirror of what we are from inside. So society is what you are essentially. So in essence, they are not separate, the world and you. That's why Krishnamurti says you are the world.
Mm-hmm.
Every human being, wherever he or she is, goes through all these psychological
Turmoils.
incidents.
Mm-hmm.
Like a person who is in India also gets hurt. A person who is living anywhere on this world also goes through this process of hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Every human being is searching for security, searching for happiness. So all these phenomena we go through. So psychologically, we are the world. And we are also separating ourselves. We share all these illusions that we are separate individuals. So we can see that transformation in the world cannot happen without transformation in the individual. And
It will be
this
too
has
arduous
to
a
begin
task
with
for
oneself.
uh, if the individuals, because a person lives in the same society, same world. So won't it be too arduous a task to initiate this change, to begin the revolution? Yeah.
Yeah, that's why we have to begin wherever we are. We need not to need not create an ideal of changing the whole world immediately. That also becomes another idea.
Yeah.
We have to understand that deeply the whole human consciousness is manifesting through each one of us. And without understanding this consciousness, whatever we do will create more confusion. So as an individual, my responsibility is to understand this phenomena, which is operating through this person. And working with oneself is also working with human consciousness, working with our fears, working with our desires, our search for security, fears, and all that. So working sincerely with oneself is what we can do. And without making this big ideal that I have to change the world. Of course, world will not change without change of individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And I cannot just wait that when the world will change, then I will change myself. So it's a choiceless work. Like, to live a life, we need a clear mind, a mind which is not, crowded by all these confusions. There is a sense of clarity. There's a sense of peace within. So the peace inside me will affect in whatever way that human consciousness. So the question is whether there is love, there is compassion, there is affection in my life. If I'm sharing those things, that will affect in whatever way the human consciousness. I need not measure it.
Mm-hmm. So, as you said, you are the world and the world is you, or the famous statement you referred to it. So there is also one statement, the whole history of mankind is in oneself, and one must read it in a glance without taking any time. Uh, any comments on this one? Is it related to what you said? We have to read the whole
Yes.
history in oneself.
Yeah. Actually, we can say that, psychologically, the whole story of humanity is within each one of us. You know, them from thousands of years, like for millions of years, this evolution has been happening. So we carry that whole evolution inside this, brain, and that's why this brain is not an individual brain; it's a brain of humanity. So the whole history of humanity is there, and so understanding this brain, understanding this mind, is also the understanding humanity. And one more thing is that when Krishnamurti says that future is now.
Hmm.
So future cannot be separate from whatever is happening now. That's why it is more important to pay attention to whatever is happening in this moment. And this is going to shape our future, the future of humanity.
Yes, in this moment,
If
there is whole of time. Yes.
yeah,
Mhm. So this question of time, or rather timelessness, is central to space teachings. Insight, which radically transforms the mind, is supposed to come in a flash, without time. What is use then of taking time to read, listen to K, meditate on the teachings, being aware, and us discussing? Will it help when it all depends on an insight which comes in a flash of timelessness?
yeah, that's why we have to find the right place of time. Time has its place in our physical day-to-day living. And what Krishnamurti is questioning is psychological time.
Mhm.
So he's saying that through psychological time, you cannot find freedom. You cannot find love. You cannot find truth. So, of course, when we are learning something, we need time to understand something, like we devote some time. But that that transformation, that freedom does not depend on time. This we have to understand. Like through the process of time, we cannot discover something timeless. Like freedom is is not depending on something. Freedom is something timeless. And if we if we search for freedom through the process of time, like through any effort, through any teacher, or through depending on anything, so that process of time will not free us. This we have to see it immediately in a glance. So this insight is timeless, and that insight doesn't depend on time. So of course we can read any teachings, we can devote time, and there is a value for that. It has its, like, that will give certain information, certain questions, but the real work, the work of that insight, does not depend on that time. It will happen in spite of that, I would say. So that's why, you know like this ignorance, illusion, suffering, they all depend on time. They are they have a cause. Something which is a cause can be created and can also be ended. you know like suffering comes because of our craving. So there is a cause, and craving can be ended through an insight into it, through attention. And like freedom, love, they are causeless. So they cannot be created or ended. So that timeless state is already there. You have nothing to do about that. Neither you can't create it, nor you can end it. So what is our work is to understand this process of illusion, the, the process of ignorance, how thought creates these illusions, and how we live in the prison of these illusions. So that's this attention, paying attention is what is important. And attention does not require any technique. This direct observation is free from time.
But insight, as we understand that, is a riddle kind of thing. Like only a silent mind can come upon insight, and it is insight that makes the mind silent. So, what can be arrived at first, a silent mind or an insight? Would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, it's very interesting. You know, if you read the teachings, you will see like paradoxes.
Yeah.
Actually, I feel all these uh, great teachings, they are full of paradoxes, if I can say. So those, they are only, they look paradoxical from outside, because they are not talking about cause and effect, like what is first.
Mm-hmm.
So when Krishnamurti says that unless you put your house in order, there cannot be love. So the first step is to put the house in order.
Mm.
And this is so true. If our house, our inner house or outer house is not in order, there will be lot of confusion, there will be suffering, there will be conflict. If things are not placed in their right place, then they create lot of misunderstanding. There is a wastage of energy. But the house can be put in order only through love. Love can put the house in order. So a mind with only a silent mind can have an insight, of course. But through insight only the mind can be silent. So they are simultaneous process. They are not cause and effect.
Yes.
This is what I was trying to say. This insight, attention, looking, listening, they are not a process of cause and effect. They just happen in a moment, and they have their own action.
Okay. So it is about 50 minutes into the meeting. So would you like to take a last question or we continue? What do you
Yeah,
say?
sure. If there is a last question, we can take it up.
Okay. So lastly, What is the vision of your life? Would you like to share with the audience? It's a personal kind of thing.
See, I feel there is one fundamental problem for the whole humanity, and that is why human beings constantly live under the shadow of fear. This psychological fear is the root cause of all our suffering, all our conflicts. So, unless we address this question, we won't be able to create peace, a true harmony on this earth. So that's why we all have to understand, question, explore this phenomenon of fear. And this fear exists because we are searching security through identification. We create an image and then we identify with that image. And once we are identified with anything, there is fear. And another cause of fear is the self-centeredness. So whatever crisis we see in the world is a result of our self-centered way of living. So my question is, can we see the danger of the self-centered way of living? The danger of living with fear. And as long as there is fear, there is self-centeredness, we cannot establish peace, harmony, and love on this earth. So my vision of life is to really explore a living which is not dominated by fear and self-centeredness. And this is an invitation. These teachings are inviting all of us to really look deeply into these destructive elements which are blocking us from living peacefully on this earth. And if we don't learn to live on this earth with this sense of wonder, sense of beauty, sense of deep love and compassion, the life is meaningless. Then we are living with ashes. We may have technological progress, advancement, everything. But in the absence of love, all our progress has no meaning. So I feel this ongoing exploration of what is love, what is compassion, what is true beauty, that is what is required in our real education. So we have to re-educate ourselves. And re-education begins by learning wherever we are imprisoned, wherever we are caught up. And so this is our shared responsibility as human beings to come together, reflect on these questions, explore, and live a life which is really authentic, genuine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mukesh, for your time. So we will now end this meeting. Hope you enjoyed this meeting, this conversation with Mukesh ji. And we will continue this meetings, these conversations further with different interviewers from all over the world in our subsequent episodes. Stay tuned to our page, Meditative Self-Inquiry with Mukesh Gupta, and you will find the updates there. Like the page and okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Kaushik. Thank you.